You're listening to If You Know You Grow the podcast. I'm your host, Chantel Braley, and I have over 15 years experience in marketing, e-commerce, and really all things creative. I'm so excited to take you behind the scenes of thriving businesses, hear from amazing industry experts, and chat a little bit about the mindset that it takes to really succeed in this industry. Please follow, like, and subscribe so that I can continue creating amazing content for you and sharing these incredible stories. Let's get into it. Welcome back to If You Know You Grow the pod. I am so excited to have you back again this week. And this week we're actually going to chat about something that normally sits a little bit heavy in my DMs. We will in a couple future weeks actually start having guests back, but I'm working through all of those episodes at the moment. So I thought it'd be a really great time to kind of take the private conversations that I tend to have and make them a bit bigger, a bit more public. So one of the things that always happens in my DMs, because again, the purpose of this pod is to really bring out those behind the scenes DM conversations and bring them into real life, is people want to chat about having a career in marketing, what that looks like, and what it takes to kind of succeed. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to cover all of that inside of a podcast, especially because I'm really trying to make sure that everything feels quite digestible. But I did want to kind of start with the beginning and start chatting about a couple of different things. One, there is very, very clearly a talent drought in the industry, and there's no way around it. Does that put you into a position of power as someone looking for a job? Unfortunately, not really. And the reason behind that is because I think there's a huge disconnect with the information that's readily accessible for future talent, as well as the way that brands' expectations are currently being managed. So if you're somebody who wants a career in marketing or who wants to get into their next level of career, I want to give you a couple of tips, tricks, etc. from someone who is behind the scenes actively looking and recruiting for companies and often having hard chats on both sides about managing expectations because, I think we live in this weird world at the moment where everything's really expensive and people value their time. And look, the expensive thing is really shit, but I'm glad that people have learned to value their time. But at the end of the day, all of these businesses are for-profit businesses that need to be really smart and really strategic about what they're hiring and who they're hiring. So I guess let's just kick it off of why do you even want a career in marketing? I will often tell people that I'm so lucky because I feel like I have my absolute dream job. Granted, I've been working at this now for 17 years. I graduated university with my first degree 17 years ago, and my career path has been anything but linear. Sometimes I made decisions for the sake of my career because I knew it would grow me. Other times I actually had to make decisions because of life circumstances, because nothing's really perfect, and that was something that I learned really early on. I'm not upset about how anything's panned out because every single thing that has happened, if it was a rejection, it is that classic, it was just a redirection. And even the things that I did that were maybe outside of what my career actually ended up being helped grow me into the strategic business leader that I am today. So why do I think you should want a career in marketing? One, it is probably the vaguest industry you could actually ever get into because everything has to be sold, whether it's a house or a product, beauty, fashion, accessories, a digital course. Everything effectively is being sold currently, right? And if you know how to sell something, you're quite valuable. But I think that you should want a career in marketing because you want to be attached to what you do and because you want to be lit up by what you do. If you are somebody that really, really wants to separate work and life, don't go for a career in marketing. And that's not because your expectations from your employer are going to be crazy. That's simply because if you have a true marketing brain, it never shuts off because you genuinely love what you do. I am always thinking of the next campaign, the next strategy, the next creator that I want to work with. And that's not something that I can turn off. And I actually think that's something that's kind of created a little bit of a secret sauce within myself. And that's kept me competitive. It helps me keep my finger on the pulse because the downside of working in online and e-com is that your store never shuts. It's always functioning. It's always operating. Yes, there are peak times. There are days where things really, really matter. But for the most part, you can see every single action and how it's financially impacting what you're doing. Another reason why I think it would be really great to want a career in marketing is if you're creative. Even if you are not somebody who wants to do creative direction, you have to think of really creative ways to make money, to be agile, to nurture your customer, and to build a brand. Those are all very much completely non-negotiables. Right now, what I'm seeing is there's a huge gap in people who want a career in marketing and then skill sets. So, do you need to go to university? I hate to say it, I don't think so. And if you're currently studying, please don't take this as a deterrent. What you're doing is you're actually learning transferable skill sets that are going to help you so much in life, but you are not going to know everything when you get out of school to walk straight into possibly the job that you want. A lot of times grads or like people who are straight out of university in marketing, I feel like they think that the potential for earning is a lot higher than it actually is. If you're not currently working while you're studying, you're actually really holding yourself back because your uni experience is an experience that an employer is even basing this decision off of, right? And the tough part of that is you're like, well, I want this job, but I have to get my foot in the door somewhere. Guess what? Getting your foot in the door means you have to be a little bit humble with what you take. I had to freelance for a very, very large portion of my career before I was taken seriously. And for a lot of people, that meant that I looked like I was an overnight success with some of the things that I was doing. But for the friends, for the OGs, for the people who have been here, they saw me slogging back in the day, doing creative direction, like, doing seeding on the Kardashian accounts, like all of these things back from the point that I was 19. It's the people who kind of joined in later, maybe the people who didn't truly understand what I was doing that saw everything eventuate and they're like, oh, wow, her career moved really quickly. No, I was putting in the hard yards, paid, unpaid, donating my time, interning, anything that I could to physically get this insane amount of exposure to the industry. Because one, not only did it help me figure out what I love and what I'm passionate about, it helped me figure out what I'm good at and also learn to make mistakes on other people's dime. The great thing is now I no longer make mistakes on other people's dime because if I don't know how to solve it, I know someone who can, hence if you know, you grow. But it just means that like I can actually say with conviction what's going to work and what's not going to work. And if I'm not sure, then I can be really honest about, hey, let's give it a go. But that came with time. So if you are somebody who is like really new in your career, then I think you might need to be really comfortable with starting from the bottom and possibly taking a step backward in order to fly forward. There's so many different reports coming out about cost of living and how, $100,000 wage is the equivalent to this wage back in this day. And there is not a single doubt in my mind that it is harder than ever to financially survive. But just because you want something doesn't mean that you can get it in that aspect. And this might sound like a little bit negative, but really it's quite realistic. I'm very privileged to work with founders who want to make sure that they are generous to their team members and they want to make sure that their team members are fairly paid, which I think is amazing. I personally won't work with a brand that won't fairly pay people, right? But current day, generously, an entry-level salary, you're sitting at $65,000. Possibly 70 if you're going into something that's maybe a bigger corporate job where there's particular banding, but 65K is a generous starting point, particularly in marketing right now. And that might sound a little bit crazy because usually us marketing girls, we're material girls and it's a little bit scary. But what I can say is that as the business you're in starts to have wins and you start to grow, you can make very clear business cases. And also in marketing, if you are actually that good, you can very, very quickly make yourself invaluable, which that means you can command larger dollar amounts, bonuses, all of those things. If you're trying to figure out what you're worth, my biggest recommendation is actually to jump in and to reach out to a recruiter, even if you're not trying to find another job. I don't recommend you trying to find another job to use that as leverage to get a promotion or get a pay rise with your current employer. That doesn't always map out very well. But recruiters actually know what's happening on the market in a way that has no bias. I don't like Glassdoor or any of those things because I've noticed that people, one, they lie, right? But also it's usually the really pissed off people that are there, or it doesn't pull like the full context when it comes to wages. One thing that I do for all of the businesses that I work in is I actually pull a salary guide. I love Revere Recruitment with M. Hayden. Everyone knows she's one of my favorite recruiters in the industry. So I love going and getting salary guides from these recruiters. And the reason I like the salary guides from a recruitment company is because they'll give you a 12-month view of absolutely everything that they've placed in market. Now, when a brand has to work with a recruiter, it often means that the salary is slightly higher because they've struggled to hire internally and they weren't able to easily fill that job. So sometimes you'll see a little bit of an inflated number, but for the most part, I trust it. But one thing that it does really, really well is it will give you a realistic expectation of where you currently sit in the industry based on your experience. Are you a junior? Are you a mid-level? Are you senior? Are you leadership? And the years and expectations that come from behind that. I often will have people that want a leadership or a senior level role. However, they are operating at junior, maybe mid-level at best. And again, it kind of comes back to that concept of like, hey, it's always nice to want things, but is it actually going to be feasible for the brand? And sometimes setting yourself up with a really, really high wage almost sets you up with like the expectation to fail. You should be able to back yourself to where you feel really comfortable with asking for a pay increase. And you should also have an employer that supports a two-way conversation about that. When it comes to asking for a promotion or a pay increase, this is pretty tough. But again, I think it comes down to being really, really armed with information. In your job, you should have a scope of what your role is. Never are you only going to work within that scope. I'd love to say that that was the truth, but if you are somebody that wants to be in a fast-growing organization, it's just not physically possible. And that's often because it's really hard to identify exactly what your job is. You should know what your key things are that you need to deliver because you want to know how you're driving impact into that business. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a clear view on all the things that you need to do. When you start working really highly out of scope, that's when you should feel really comfortable with being able to go to your boss and say, hey, I've been actually doing a lot higher duties than I was hired for. And I'd love to chat about how we can shape future progression together within this company. If you have a healthy employer, they're going to be so excited to have that conversation. I love having that conversation. Sometimes I can't work to the timeline that somebody wants, either because the company does have internal budgets that they have to stick to, or it's because maybe the employee is just not quite ready yet, but they're not ready to hear it. But it creates a really healthy two-way conversation of, hey, I want to support you in getting there. I recognize that you're doing these things, but these are also things that I need you to improve upon before we can start to formalize this. And there should actually be responsibilities on both sides. So the leader should have responsibilities of what they need to do to upscale you as someone they want to invest in their business, but also as an employee, you should have a lot of clarity as to what you need to improve upon. So if you're first jumping in, you're like, oh, well, this is probably something that I don't really know how to do. And that's the truth. So my advice to you with that is you need to hustle. And I know we're like, oh, hustle culture is toxic. I don't want hustle culture. I'm sorry, you're going into a for-profit business and you need to be hungry in order to succeed. And that's not to make it sound toxic. That's literally just the truth. Ways that you can hustle before getting the job are literally things like interning, building a portfolio of social media content that is good. Even if you don't provide your social media handle, people are going to look for you. And it's not about you necessarily being cool, but I think it's kind of trying to get to know you a little bit better. Your colleagues are people that you spend so much time with. It's important to know who you're bringing on board. And if you're somebody that's going into a social media role, your personal socials are things that are looked at to consider as to whether or not you're going to be good at that role. This is why there are so many like micro creators that are coming in-house with brands currently. It's because even if they have zero marketing experience, they actually know how to be hands on the tools. And that's very, very, very valuable. I know like the hire that I've brought into my business this year, this was really big because I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have an employee. I'm responsible for paying someone's superannuation. Oh my God. Also, it's kind of funny because she's going to be editing this, so she's going to know my true feelings, but I think I've already told her anyways. It was like a really daunting feeling to have that, right? So this was going to be a huge investment for me. And it wasn't just about finding somebody who could do the things. I needed somebody that was going to be really great and really present for where I currently am, because I don't have SOPs for everything, right? I actually can't tell you what the day to day is going to look like because my day to day changes. But I knew that in order to resource for what my next level of growth was going to be, that I needed to put in an investment. So I found somebody who is very, very technically skilled, but also has this huge transferable skill set. And I often think that you don't sell your transferable skill set as an individual because you think that it's not valuable for the brand that you're going to. If someone knows how to read a resume or knows how to do an initial step, then they will find the transferable skill set. Often what I'll do when I'm searching for people is I will do my shortlist. I'll make my shortlist probably a little bit wider than it needs to be. And then I send through a survey. And the reason I do the survey is because I want to give people the ability to showcase their transferable skill set and their way of thinking without having touch time with me, because I have very limited time. From there, they'll go straight into an interview process and then into a final interview. So I try to have things with a really strict turnaround, ultimately. Like, that is the goal, right? Not always possible, but we try. But it's really interesting how I probably get more of an indicator as to who I'm going to hire in that survey step, which is always a Google form. Like, it's not actually anything really fancy. I get more inside of that step for a role than I do at any other part of the process. I usually know at the survey part as to who I'm going to hire, because I'm able to pick up things like, did you actually give a shit? Did you mean to apply for this job, and are you interested? I'm able to pick up things like, who else are they following? What brands are they looking at? Do they actually feel aligned? I always have a point where I ask if they have any other questions. Are they thinking about the brand? Do they have any questions for me? Are they wanting to know about career progression? Is the first thing that they're going to ask about salary? That's not necessarily like a red flag if someone wants to know the salary, but if that's the only question that somebody has and they don't have any other questions, like, it's a little bit concerning. And with that, when you're in an interview process, always come prepared with questions. One of my favorite questions that people can ask me is, what does the company culture look like and how do I define success in the role? The reason that I care about those things is because I want someone who wants to find a company culture that's going to work for them. And I also really, really want someone who cares about what success looks like, because if they don't care, then like, how am I supposed to care? Okay, so if you are someone who you're like, well, I want to start, I want a job in the industry, I want a career. I get so many people who are like, I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you. And I'm not opposed to it. However, I only have so many hours in a day. And there comes a point where you're like, I can only let people pick my brain or have a cup of coffee so many times for free. So one, offer a value exchange. DM somebody who you want to work with and say, hey, can I come and see how you work? Can I help support you in something? Can I do this, right? Okay, yes, you're asking for something for free, but one, you're asking someone to do something that's different, but one is going to stop them in their tracks and be like, oh, this is interesting. But two, it means that they get something out of it, because we are kind of in this world where no one should really do anything for a value exchange. And at the end of the day, like, an hour of my time, I'm very proud to admit, is worth hundreds of dollars. And not that I wouldn't give somebody that time, but I may not have it because it may already be booked out. So, is there an opportunity where I can, chat to someone and maybe they'll make content for one of the brands that I'm working with, or maybe they will, help me with some of my personal brand content or something like that, right? Like, that would be something that I would be interested in. But also, if I'm going to give you advice, please use that advice and action that advice. So many people who have come up in their industry, so many people who have come up in the industry in the last couple of years have done so by building a really strong personal brand, even if they don't have that experience. A lot of these, like marketing girlies that we see on TikTok, if we saw their resumes, they wouldn't be bad resumes, but it's their work and the way that they put themselves out there that is really making them stand apart against other people. The amount of people that I have had send me the same 5 or 6 girls off of TikTok because they want to work with those girls is insane. And the resumes are fine, but it's the work that they're putting out there, because you can see that these girls can actually create really great content. You can see that they understand marketing, and you can see that they love what they're doing and that they're incredibly passionate. So those are all things that are like super important to, especially like an early level e-com brand. If you're someone who's already established in your career, then you need to get out there. You need to get out there and show up at events. You need to speak to people who have the careers that you want, and you need to be constantly learning about emerging technology, because those are ways for you to have a competitive advantage. And then probably the last piece of advice that I'd give you is make sure that you are personalizing your resume, especially like the top portion of your resume and your cover letter, to the place that you're applying. And that might sound stupidly simple, but it is way too easy to apply for a job. The amount of times that I have somebody who like works at the coffee club that wants a social media job where you need to have 2 to 3 years experience, like that is a very, very frequent thing that I see. And it's not that I won't give somebody that job that's been working at the coffee club, because they may have a really strong transferable skill set and maybe more skilled than other people. But my biggest fear or biggest issue is like, if I can't see that and you just look like you've worked at the coffee club, you're going to get lost in that group of resumes. So have you actually been a freelance social media manager for the last 3 years, and or have you worked on your personal brand, or what's that? That's what needs to be sitting at the top, because your coffee club experience is transferable. And yes, you've got really great resilience and you've got customer service skills and you can think on your feet, and those are all really important. But the more entry level the job, the more competition you have. So you may be sitting against 400 to 500 people, and that is a considerable difference in terms of like when you're more advanced in your career. And like, if I'm hiring for a really high level job, I might only have 10 applicants. And that's when it gets a little bit scary. And often that's when you employ like recruiters or headhunters, because you're looking for someone very specific who has a very specific skill set. But when you're starting, like, kind of the world is your oyster, I guess, in the sense of you can sell yourself. Again, like, it's going back to marketing being this concept of selling. Like, you can sell yourself in any way, shape, or form that you deem possible. And I guess like the last thing that I would say about like getting this like career job in marketing is like, it's going to take a while for you to really get the wins on the board. And like, you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with trying something new, putting yourself out there, being uncomfortable, and eventually it will pay off. And to me, like, it's the most incredible job that you could actually ever have. Like, I love everything that I do. I know that you've heard me say that so many times, but I've had to do the hard yards, and I'm going to continue to do the hard yards as I continue to grow in my career. You get to see all the really cool, fun highlights of everything that I do now. You don't get to see the other side. And part of it I can't share because a lot of it's really private, and that's not information that I'm at liberty to discuss, because I have NDAs, which sounds cool in itself. But other things is like, you wouldn't want to sit and watch it. So know that like for every highlight reel that people are going to share, there's going to be things that suck. And I actually love to ask that in the interview process. I ask people what they love about what they do, but also what are the things that they don't like, because what you don't like will share a lot about your personality, not in a negative way, but in the understanding of how comfortable are you in saying, actually, I don't really like pulling data. I understand that it's really important for my job, but I prefer to use tools to optimize the way that I review things because I feel that it's not my strength. It says so much about a person. Well, hopefully out of this, you've been able to get a couple of tips and tricks on ways that you can kind of get yourself out there and get your career started. If you're somebody that is thinking of making a change this year to your career, I think that this is going to be another year that feels really tough in the e-commerce industry. We've seen a lot of interesting things happen so far in the economy, and anything that's a nice to have category may start to feel a little bit sticky. So I would definitely encourage you to, yes, make those changes, but know that it may be a little bit harder this year to make changes, and expectations may be changing. So keep an open mind as to where you want to go next, but also, if you're going to move, try to find something that feels really aligned. And that's super woo-woo spiritual girl of me, but the points where I have had the best growth, they haven't actually always come from the shiny brand. They've come from the brand where I feel aligned with the team, aligned with the vision, and I've got a lot of room to grow. So maybe with that, even try to work for a brand that maybe isn't as exciting, because you know what? That probably means it's a little bit less competitive, and it's a really great opportunity for you to showcase what you've got, because everybody wants a job at CSB. CSB is only going to hire so many roles, but there are so many jobs that may seem less attractive, but long-term are going to add so much more for you. So if you're making a shift this year, whether it be in your salary range, your role, or your employer, I wish you nothing but the best. But I think that everybody should go after the career that they want. So I hope you do that. Have a great week.